establishment has been telling you may not be accurate about vaccines. Because like what you just said, the claim that you're a flat earther, you're an anti-vaxxer, those they're used as a way to say you are really out there and dumb. Right?
They're completely equal in their impact.
And so it takes incredible cognitive dissonance to say there are real problems with vaccines. But vaccines really sit in their own little universe. They're unlike any other medical product. They're not like penicillin. They're not like any other drugs. They're not like any other product out there, any other product in this room, anything out there, for one major reason. Every other product that exists, I can sue the company. I can hold them accountable if that product injures or kills you or your child on the basis that product could have been safer. The only product, and I mean this literally, the only product in America where you cannot sue to say, had you made that product safer, my child wouldn't be dead. My child wouldn't be seriously injured. They wouldn't have a neurological disorder. They wouldn't have immunological disorder. They wouldn't have a nervous system disorder. They wouldn't have a cardiac issue. Are childhood vaccines and child vaccines used by adults. It's the only one. And that's because of a law called the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act of 1986. It gave pharma companies that incredibly special immunity. Now, just to put that into context, okay, and I'll tie this back in a second as to how we ended up with this notion of this belief religion in vaccines, because, given industry 40 years of unopposed ability to influence, they're going to get pretty dang far, and they did with vaccines. And so, a lot of industries face a crossroads where their products are causing more harm than good. Gas tanks used to explode. What did they do? Made a better gas tank, right? Building materials had asbestos, caused cancer. What did they do? They make better building materials, right? Did they give them immunity? No, of course not. But in the instance of vaccines leading up to 1986, there were only 3 routine vaccines. That's it. That's all there was. A child following the CDC schedule in 1986 got 3 injections on or before their first birthday. Okay? Those 3 products were causing so much harm and injury that every manufacturer of them went out of business. And that was the MMR vaccine, the DTP, and the OPV vaccine. Every single one, from 6 down to 1, or for the pertussis vaccine, 6 down to 1 for measles, about 3 down to 1 for polio. And with one company left for each, instead of forcing them to do what every other industry has to do, like I said, make better building materials without asbestos, make better cars that don't explode, go down the chain of different products out there, Congress did something completely unique. It said, you know what? We're just going to give you immunity. We're going to make it so that no company, no individual, no parent, no child can sue you for the injuries and deaths caused by your vaccine products. That is what the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act 1986 did. And not only for those 3 products, but for any other childhood vaccine thereafter. And what that effectively has done is given 40 years for the industry to promote their products with no pushback. When you read about a problem with a car, where are you reading about it from? Usually a class action lawsuit in the paper, right? You're not going to read about that in vaccines typically. And because of that, you ended up where we are. Anyways, there's a lot more detail. So going back to how we make products safer in America or anywhere, okay? It's not the government. Governments don't make products safer. Look at extremely authoritarian regimes where there was very little free market, like the former USSR. You think products were safe? No. What makes products safe? It's the economic self-interest of the company. It's the economic interest of the company to make the product safer. Why? You probably own stock, right? And where do you want your stock to go, up or down? How do you want it to go? You want it to go up or you want it to go down? Where do you want it to go?
Up.
You want it to go up. Okay. So do all the investors.
Right.
So does everybody who owns that stock. So does Wall Street. So does the CEO. So does the board. So does everybody. The people who have the stock. Everybody involved. All the employees that have stock options, including usually the major ones. Everybody wants it to go up. If you lose money, it doesn't go up. So normally, the interest to assure a product is safer is aligned with the profit motive. Because if your product causes injury and harm, then you're going to lose money. So you want to know typically. You have an economic self-interest as a corporation to know, not because you're altruistic, not because you're moral, not because you're ethical, just because you have that economic self-interest to assure the product is safe before you go to market and after you go to market, okay? And that exists for every product in America with effectively one exception, vaccines. That's really it. When you think of drugs, and this will help, I think, tie into what you're saying about what happened with COVID, most drugs are licensed based on multi-year placebo-controlled trials. Most of them. Why? Because the FDA requires it? Because the FDA is so great? No. Nothing to do with the FDA. It's because the company wants to know whether the drug is safe or not before it goes to market. Because you know what happens with the drug that they put out that's going to make $40 billion in revenue or $20 billion but causes $100 billion in harm? They end up upside down. So they want to know to a reasonable degree how safe the drug is before it goes to market. In an attempt not to cherry pick, as I did in my book, I found an article that listed the top 4 selling profitable drugs by Pfizer as of like 2021 or something, 2019, okay? And if you look at those 4 most profitable drugs, as I put in my book, each one has 2 to 7 years of follow-up in the clinical trial that was relied upon to license that drug against a placebo control group. Just to make sure I'm sure everybody knows what that means, but that just means a group that gets something inert. So this way you give the group the experimental drug, you give a group the placebo, something inert, you track them for multiple years, and then you compare all the outcomes, cardiovascular outcomes, neurological outcomes, go down the list, and cancer rates, and you see the difference. You get a real, actual sense of the safety between those two for that product. In contrast, for most childhood vaccines, instead of years, it's often days or weeks of safety review in the clinical trial relied upon to license them. Not a single, and I know that folks contest this all the time, but it's in the FDA literature. Not a single routine injected childhood vaccine was licensed based on a placebo-controlled trial, save for the COVID vaccine, by the way, for children. It's the only one. Not a single one, okay? Nor was the vaccine sometimes uses the control itself licensed based on a placebo-controlled trial, nor anywhere down that chain. Chapter 10 of my book, I go through every vaccine. I have it all cited to the FDA licensure documents. You can listen to the talking heads, or you can rely on the primary sources from the FDA, which is why I call my book Vaccines Amen, because there is what they tell you, and then there's what the actual evidence shows, right? So that gives you an example of the outcome of not having an economic self-interest. With drugs, they have it, so they want to know the safety.
Can I challenge you on that? What about
Please.
Vioxx? Like the Vioxx people knew that there was one of the things that was revealed during the trial is that they knew that there was going to be issues. But I think the quote was, "We still think we'll do well," and that was one of the damning aspects of the email disclosure, because you got a chance to see how these guys talk about this drug that they're about to release. I think they wound up paying a percentage of the amount of money they made from the drug, but they made way more from the drug than they did the fine.
No, I appreciate that challenge, and it's why I said when I was saying that they do the analysis of whether they're going to have $100 billion in loss or $40 billion in revenue. I'm not saying they won't put out a drug that causes harm.
You're saying it can't cause too much harm.
Exactly.
Okay.
They can't. They don't want to end up upside down. And remember, the whole reason a drug is licensed is because it can cause harm.
The crazy thing about the Vioxx one is I think it killed somewhere north of 50,000 people, and they still made profit off of it, which is kind of bananas. They pulled it and made billions in profit. This is the darker aspect of this. if you were talking about companies that never did anything wrong and had the highest moral and ethical standards, and they're the ones, because it's not about money, it's about saving people's health, and it's about public safety, and we got to make sure that we do this right. We got to make sure we squash all the disinformation. But that's not what you're talking about. You're talking about these companies that have been fined billions of dollars in criminal fines for fraud, for all kinds of shit. These are the people. And the idea that they wouldn't lie about vaccines, like this is the one thing they're going to tell you the truth. Ruthless capitalists attached to money and drugs. This is the one thing they're going to 100% tell you the truth about. That seems kind of kooky. That's a hard sell for anybody who's not ideologically captured. That's a hard sell.
Yeah, but I don't think you need to go down the road that there's some kind of evil nefariousness there. It's pure,
that's not what I'm saying.
It's a broken economic and regulatory system from my perspective.
Right.
It's just a completely broken economic. To your point about Vioxx, right? So in Vioxx, it caused incredible amount of harm, but they still decided that the benefits outweighed the risk. Do you know the story about the cars that used to explode? It's the classic case we learned in law school. And the gas tank and these cars.
Was it a Pinto?
It was the Pintos. That's right.
Yeah.
And a number of them explode every year, burning the people inside them alive to death. Right. Horrible way to go. And there was a lawsuit, and in that lawsuit, what they discovered was the company had done an internal calculation in which it did the math. What's it going to cost to actually fix all the gas tanks? What's that dollar number versus what's it going to cost to just pay out for those deaths every year for those people that we burn knowingly are going to die and burn to death in those cars. Yeah. And the calculation was that it was going to cost less to pay out for the deaths. And that is what the internal document showed. And that, by the way, is in part the quintessential case you learn in law school for why they have punitive damages. Because the punitive damages were there to force the company to conform its conduct in exactly that scenario where the economics weren't going to do it, right? Even in something that horrible, when the market forces weren't sufficient, the economic self-interest wasn't there, you had to make it happen. How? Through punitive damages. I know there's a lot of, news about punitive damages. Oh, it's excessive and so forth. But that's what they're there for. They're there for that scenario.